I'm Laura Roth with Daughters of the American Revolution, and this is Paul Sullwold in Shakopee, Minnesota. It's October 10th, 2023. So, Paul, off the top of my head, where were you born?
I was born in Minneapolis.
Okay. And do you have any siblings?
I have two siblings, my sister Elaine and my brother Eugene.
And did you enlist or were you drafted into Vietnam?
Interestingly, I enlisted. My brother had been in the Air Force and he got out. Um, and my dad had not been in the military, but he worked for Minneapolis Moline. So all during World War II, he worked 7 days a week building military stuff that they did. And so here we were. I graduated from high school in 1965 from Hopkins High School, a town outside of Minneapolis. And about 4 or 5 of my best friends, the 6 of us, went up to the recruiters and we started talking to the different recruiters. And 2 of my buddies joined the Marines. I think 2 of them joined the Navy, and I joined the Air Force with another one of my friends. So I came home and I said, it was 1967. They offered us a early enlistment, so they gave us a 3-month delay before we actually left. So I came home and I said, "Hey, Dad, I just joined the Air Force," and he goes, "You do know there's there's a war cranking up over there in Southeast Asia?" And I said, "Yeah, it's going to be exciting." And so away we went. We raised some cane for 3 months until we were leaving, and uh, got on the plane and went down there and went to San Antonio, Texas. They shaved our heads and reshaped ourselves, and so it was quite a learning experience. I grew up in a small town, not exposed to big city. I mean, really big city people and so on. Uh, so when we went through basic training, it was a real grow up period of time. You changed from this bright eyed young kid, and you started getting some maturity pretty quickly. You learned, uh, you know, a lot of people don't realize how much they teach you during basic training and ingrain all these things. Some of the guys, I luckily had run cross country when I was in high school, um, and uh, some of the guys, you had to run so far and get it done before you could get out of basic training. And the worst thing in the world would be getting set back. So there were times when a couple of us, several of us, dragged some people through the route and made the time so our team could get through the 6 weeks.
And everybody had to finish?
Well, either you finished or the ones who got done went through, and you got set back and you had to do it all over again. And so there was no room for making mistakes, and it was very character building, I would say, for sure. And when I look back, it was terrible, I thought, while I was going through it, but there were so many things that were well designed to create your faith in your uh, drill sergeant and all the different things. And
Like what?
now, as an example, I was doing guard duty, and I was standing by the door and I was looking out, and it was the middle of the night, and I was kind of leaned my head on the door, just kind of relaxing a little bit. And one of the other drill sergeants came by and raised Cain and says, "Oh, you're not, dereliction of duty and everything, whatever." And so he brought me over the drill sergeant, and my drill sergeant said, "What are you doing to my man? I'm gonna take care of him, and we'll work this out within our own." And you could, when I look back at it years later, you could see they just set it up so that it was like this man was 10 feet tall and my hero, and he saved me from whatever I was going to get for leaning my head on the door. But it was a good experience. Got through the basic training. Discovered they had promised I would do computer repair, which was a new thing back then, 1967. And they said, "Oh, you're colorblind and you need to be able to see all these different color wires in a computer, so you're going to have to do something else." So they gave me my choice of anything on the card, and I picked refrigeration and air conditioning. And so the idea on that was computers needed to be cooled and kept at a certain temperature in order to be accurate. Back then there was punch cards and all kinds of stuff with the computers. So I thought, well, this will be get me to a direction I'm going. I had been a plumber apprentice before I went into the service. I kept that secret because I didn't want to be a plumber in the service, and so it all worked out. And so I finished basic training, went off to tech school, 18 weeks in Denver to technical school. Then I went.
Which fort? Do you remember?
Lowry Air Force Base. And I just did my training there, and then I went to what I volunteered for temporary duty over in back to Texas to specialty training in special controls for industrial and commercial air conditioning and that kind of stuff. And then I eventually got assigned to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. And so I worked in the civil engineering group there. And we were coming and going so much, so basically civilians ran the show, and the military backed them up and did everything they had to do because we were, moving on and doing different things. I got involved in what was called, we called it Prime Beef. It's Prime Base Emergency Engineering Force. And so that was something that carried forward when I got orders for overseas. And we were on 45-minute call, had to have our bags packed at all times. And it was kind of like a very, very, very similar to the Seabees. And
what
so
did you do?
When I get to Okinawa, I'll tell you about some of the things that we did. Didn't do much of anything in the States except be available, I guess. So then in 67, got all my training going. 68, came to Colorado, watched the landing on the moon, all those good things. And got orders for Da Nang, and I was supposed to be leaving and heading over there. I actually had my plane tickets and everything. And I had fortunately met this beautiful nurse. And it turned out I kind of liked her a lot. And I only knew her for 2 months when I got orders for Vietnam, and figured that was going to be it. Probably that would go by the wayside. She invited me when I was going home on leave to get ready to go. She invited me over to meet her family at a wedding. I did that, and then she came and met my family and flew back. She flew back to Denver, and I decided kind of like, I got to get engaged. I can't let this girl go. So I bought a ring with my mother's help. I get a lot of heat over that. Your mother help you pick out your wedding engagement ring? But it's what happened. She was a great lady, and so I flew down to Denver and proposed to Tina. She accepted. I said, "So, you want to do it?" And she says, "You're gonna have to do better than that."
Good girl.
So she made me get down on one knee and propose to her, and she doesn't remember this exactly, but I remember it being in the parking lot of Denver International Airport. So it was pretty cool. then we went back, and I only had I don't know, just a few days before I was shipping out. And I remember going to the airport, and she saw me off, and there was a lot of tears leaving. Anyway, kind of crazy. So I flew over to headed out, and they changed my orders. Something went wrong in Da Nang, and they said, "Hey, head over to Okinawa." They changed my route. We stopped in Hawaii, then Wake Island, smallest little island you'll ever land an airplane on. Actually, the runway runs out over the ocean, so it's really short. Picked up some fuel there, and then flew into Okinawa. And so I had about a month or so in there, and we came to the conclusion that I was going to stay there for at least 18 months or so maybe longer. So we checked things out, some friends of mine, and I found out that there was a real big need for nurses over in the Army hospital. So I set it up, and they said, yeah, Tina could get a job, apply for a job there if she got her government service rating. So she got a GS8, I think, and literally sold everything she had. I mean, everything, because in order for her to come over there during wartime, she had to have round trip tickets. And so she sold everything, bought the round trip tickets, and flew over there. I picked her up at the airport, had a flat on the way, so I was a little bit late, and I think she thought she was abandoned. But got there. I'll never forget it. It was a 57 Chevy, and there this lady came walking out from the airport, and it was pretty cool stuff. I had gone through all
How
of the.
did you get a 57 Chevy in Okinawa?
There was one there, and it was all fixed up, tricked out with rolled and pleated. You could get everything done for practically nothing in the local shops and everything. So there was that, and so she started working in the Army hospital, and we started preparing to get married. Went through all the classes that you have to do and whatnot, and then they said, "Well, you can't get married till the general signs off," and they have kind of a rule where servicemen make it difficult for them to get married, because oftentimes they would go overseas. First girl they meet, they're in love with, and this, of course, was different, but rules are rules, and they cover generally everybody. So they said the general won't sign the papers, and so we waited and waited, and finally, being from Minnesota, Hubert Humphrey was our state senator and then vice president, and so I went in and I said, I'm going to write a letter to Hubert Humphrey, and I'm going to tell him that the general won't let us get married. And he said, essentially, we have to live in sin. And so I found out later that they put it in my records that I had congressional influence, and that went right in my records. I don't know if that's true or not, but somebody said that they saw it in there. And 2 days later, after I made that inference that I was going to contact Humphrey, he signed off, and
you never had to write the letter?
I never had to write the letter. But the cool thing, or the uncool thing, was we went in and talked to the priest on the base, and he says, well, I'm leaving on vacation. He says, so we got to do it on Christmas Eve or I'm going to be gone. So here it was, Christmas Eve. We ran down. We actually loaded up our stuff, went down to the capital down by Okinawa, where the American consulate was, and had to fill out our own paper. Nobody was hardly working. She typed up the stuff and everything. And we went up to the counter and at the American consulate, and he said, you swear that everything on this is the truth, so help you God? And we said yes. And he goes, boom, you're married. So that was a little anticlimactic. great, great story for Okinawa. Well, then we went to the interpreters, and it had to be translated into Japanese so that we could go to the Japanese consulate and get officially married. So we got it translated. Cost $5, a lot of money back in those days, and they translated it. We went to the Japanese consulate, and we went up to the counter with our paperwork, and the the guy says, "One moment, please," and he called over some people, and they all went like this: "Congratulations, you married!" Boom. So there was that. We got married twice, and then we bolted down to the back to the base, and we got into the chapel. And Father Newman said, "Well, I've got mass coming, and I'm hearing confessions. In between that, you can come in, and we'll marry you in the side chapel." So, or actually, maybe it was even his office, but he says, "We got to have a couple of witnesses here." And so we looked around, and there was a Okinawan guy practicing playing the organ, and then a lady practicing singing. She was Okinawan. And we brought them in, and they were our witnesses. And we called my buddy over at the barracks, and he came and took some pictures. And we actually got married without our wedding clothes on.
Oh.
But cool little piece to this, walking out of the chapel, I said, "Well, that was kind of anticlimactic, And all of a sudden, it hit 6 o'clock, and the bells started chiming and ringing while we're walking out from the church. So it's like, this is the way it's meant to be. We went back to our apartment. I put on my dress blue, and she put on her wedding dress, no shoes or anything. I had regular pants on, just my dress blues from the waist up, and my buddy took the picture of us, and that's what we sent to my folks, because my mother would have been really amazed. And I've got a little picture of.
Can I hold it up to the camera? Is that okay?
Sure.
Actually, I might have you hold it. That is beautiful. So was that at your apartment?
I think so. Yep, that's the curtain on our
Oh.
apartment. And we lived off base, and our apartment, the buildings are so close together over there in Okinawa that one of our good friends in the military, him and his wife, you could go out onto our little patio, which was about 4 by 8, and it was 6 inches away from the next building, and we could literally climb over the edge and into their apartments.
Oh my gosh.
That's how close the buildings were.
So were all 3 of the weddings the same day?
All 3 of the weddings on the same day, December 24th, 1969.
Oh my, that's crazy.
So you can imagine what our folks were thinking. I mean, we knew each other for 2 weeks, or 2 months, 3-4 months eventually. There's no way you could expect that marriage to last, right? Well, we're hitting 54 years this December.
It's a good thing to keep in mind.
Pretty happy with that. Our time on Okinawa was interesting. Right about then in 1969-70, the Okinawans were pretty frustrated with the Vietnam War. We were running missions out onto Vietnam and Laos and the other areas around there. B-52s were going out every day. Reconnaissance missions, which I wasn't even allowed to even talk about to Tina at the time. We had the now well known, but that back then you couldn't even talk about the SR-71, which was an incredible reconnaissance plane. And I was very proud to have kept the computers within plus or minus 2 degrees, because literally that plane was flown by the computers once the pilot got it going up at 80,000 feet at 2,600 miles an hour, or probably better. they did a really fantastic job of reconnaissance for our troops and people. Great little piece of that story was we ran into one of the kids who grew up in my neighborhood who was in the Civil Air Patrol, and he was a pilot on the same reconnaissance side of the base as we were at, and he had his wife over there, so we were able to get together with them, and you can't imagine how valuable it was having other people there close to your same age. He was about 3 or 4 years older than me. He ended up retiring as a full bird colonel, and stayed in the Air Force, served in Korea and all kinds of other places. But he was right there, and we would get together, and this young couples club that was formed, people 5 years and younger, married 5 years and less, would have a chance to get together and share issues and problems and deal with when somebody would get mobilized or whatever. Myself being on the Prime Beef group, when the Okinawans started riding against America, they were worried they were going to get dragged into the war, so they started rioting and storming the base. There were rumors of them having, we knew they had burned some military vehicles and whatnot. Potentially there was some fatalities, so there was a lot of anxiety going on when they were rioting. They went on strike, and so I would often get attached to the Seabees, and so they would call us down. The Okinawans went on strike and wouldn't unload the bombs off the ships, and they had to be brought in for the planes. So they mobilized us along with the Seabees. Seabees taught us how to become stevedores. We had 4 days to learn how to be a stevedore, and captain gave me 50 Marines, and he said, go unload ships. And so we did. And that's the way the Prime Beef worked. I mean, if they needed whatever it was, if something needed to be built, if something needed to be changed, you got mobilized, and away you went. So I could be gone for a week or so, and Tina would be kind of on her own, going in and out of the Army hospital and doing her thing. I feel strongly that she did her time and did her service, and I'm very proud of her and all the nurses that worked there. Kind of interesting little example, the Young Couples Club went out to an island. We commandeered a landing craft and brought all the women out there and everything we needed, and stayed on this island for a retreat, authorized by one of the priests on the base. And we got a big helicopter to haul our equipment out. We couldn't bring the women out there. They weren't allowed to be on the planes. So we flew the helicopter out there and dropped all our stuff off, and then floated them out in the 3 foot, 4 foot seas, everybody throwing up over the edges and everything like that, and got there, and it literally was like the landing craft that drops the front down, and brought the women in, and we brought along some cooks, conscripted some cooks to volunteer and be there. The time we were out there, the local people on the island heard there was a possibility of a nurse being in our group, and they had a little kid who had broken his or her arm, and they brought her over. Tina set the arm with whatever we could get to make that work, and then we called in a helicopter, and they flew him over back to the Army hospital and helped him out. So that was kind of a unique thing that could happen. Especially, I don't think it could happen during peacetime, but during wartime, the helicopter pilots and everything else, the Marines, they were willing to do things, whatever it took to get the mission done. And in this case, that was the mission. So that was fun. We spent quite a while on Okinawa. um, 11 months after we got married. I say that carefully. We had our first child over there, and he was born in the Army hospital. Um, I'm sure my mother and my in-laws were counting the weeks to see whether we organized this bringing her over there because she might have been pregnant, but she wasn't. It was all good. Mark, my oldest son, was born on Okinawa, and we had to, the Army hospital is considered American soil, so he was automatically American citizen, and so all of that worked out well. She continued to work as long as she could in the Army hospital, even though she was pregnant, and we grew and gained friendship with the other military people that we carried on to this day, communicating in some ways, and have visited my old sergeant. Him and his wife were a little older than us, and they um, um, Sergeant Dick Yarber was his name, Bevan Dick Yarber, and they kind of like became our substitute parents or whatever with the answering the questions that you need answering. And so we were beginning our married life, without the fun of having your family close by, but we had the fun of all these friends and everything. I was pretty pleased too with they Barry Goldwater set up a a deal back then. You didn't have cell phones that you could call all over, so we would, when for instance when Mark was born, I went over to our reconnaissance side. I got onto a ham radio and called over to Barry Goldwater's ham radio, and he patched it into a phone, and so I would say, hello, this is Paul, over. And they'd say, hi, how you doing, over. And you'd go back and forth like that. And I says, well, I just had a baby. His name is Mark, born on November 7th. And they said, and then over, and they said, that's not possible, over. It's November 6th. And so we had the dateline difference, and so we laughed about that. But there was a lot of good things that were done for us that made things work, and it was appreciated so much. I was, when I got out of the service, I was very disappointed in how the Vietnam veterans, the Vietnam era veterans, it didn't matter if you were in country or not, everybody served to make the mission work at the request of the government. And there were a lot of people who didn't see it that way and demonstrated against the servicemen. And so I'm very gratified to see that things have turned the corner and changed somewhat. And there's very much more respect for our military people. I'm presently serving with the Shakopee Veterans Honor Guard. I'm the vice commander there, and we do funerals for veterans, and we see them all the way from still back to World War II. That's getting fewer and farther between, and on up to young veterans, and it's very gratifying for the group of us. There's about 30 of us in the Shakopee Honor Guard, and we take that time to thank those veterans as they leave this world. So I'm proud of that.
That's why you should be.
So, what have I missed?
Oh, this has been wonderful. What was the best part of your service experience?
I would have to, there were peaks and valleys in all of it. I thought it was very interesting. I got a chance to meet other cultures, learn about people. I was kind of a naive young kid, got into the service. got pushed around a little bit, and some people kind of see your vulnerability and they push you around a little bit. I had one of my Mexican friends. His name was Morales. He came up to me one night and he said, "Hey, buddy, you got to stand up for yourself, or you're going to get pushed around the rest of your time." He says, "You're going to come learn karate with me, and you're going to join this group we're doing." And he taught me how to eat hot sauce and shape up and to stand up for myself. And it turned out, once I did, everything worked out fine. And so, you know, here's a time I think of. Some people look at immigrants as not the best thing for us. Well, for me, this immigrant showed me how to be a man, and that's what the military does for you in general. You make the best friends who you could lay your life down for if you had to, and they would do it for you. And so I appreciate that. Probably the highlight of the whole thing was getting married, being lucky enough to bring my wife over there, and having us serve our country together. It was a cool thing. Very proud of that.
What do you think was the hardest part of your military experience looking back?
Um, Watching when some of my friends came on R&R over. They were in Vietnam and they came back to Okinawa to spend a week or two of R&R. I saw the changes. They went over there, full of spirit and positivity and everything else. And I think they came out of there, and they came out of there a little jaded, a little broken down from the war experience, and that saddened me. And to this day, I see the PTSD that drags on with some of the veterans that I interface with, and I'm saddened by that. I'm also uplifted by how the VA is doing wonderful things for everybody I see. They've been there for me every step of the way, and taking care of anything that had anything to do with my military service. And in fact, once you get a service connected disability, they take care of everything, no questions asked. So that's the good part. The bad part is, the personality changes that come over our servicemen after they experience war and all that they have to go through.
Do you feel how do you feel military service affected you or changed you?
It made me a better person. It made me respect different, I don't want to say lifestyles. It makes me respect people from different cultures and different parts of the world. I saw how I improved my outlook on America and all the wonderful things we have in this country, that there's a lot of people who have never been to see war and poverty, that there's just nothing like it here in the United States. And the people forge on and help each other. And the military taught me that, the Band of Brothers movie, the camaraderie, it's real. So I'm very proud to have been in the service and to serve.
Do you remember the day you went home or the day you ended service?
I do. It was kind of amazing, and yet, we were traveling. We traveled separate because I flew with a military plane, and Tina flew back with our child, and she had to endure that 18-hour trip that way. We found friends in California that we could stay with until I got discharged. It was a big relief for me to be able to know that I was exiting and not being on call every minute, and anything could change, and so you worry about your family when you're over there. Fortunately, others look out for your family when you're in a military situation, but yeah, it was a big relief when I got out.
How long had you been in Okinawa? Was it about 2 years?
We went there in December of 1969, and we came back in June of 71.
Okay, about a year and
And I remember I had joined up on this delayed enlistment thing, so theoretically they told me, I probably would get out early. And so, having the family and everything, Captain called me in and he says, "Hey, how about re-enlisting?" And I says, I just don't think it's going to work with the family, being on call all the time and the way it's going. And so he got me promoted. I made E5. He says, "Well, how about now? You think you want to stay in now, Sergeant?" And I said, I think I'm going to get out. No, and by the way, check it out. I was on delayed enlistment, so I'm going to get to leave early. And a couple weeks later, he called me in and he says, "We're just not going to be able to let you go." And I says, "You can't do that." He says, "Really? You serve at the will of the president. Until your replacement comes, you get to stay." So they kept me out my full time until June, which was fine.
How much longer had you had to wait?
3 months.
Okay.
It took 3 months to get it pulled off. But and I was willing to leave early, but I didn't have a problem. I liked my time, my service, and it was pretty good. And the times we spent out exploring Okinawa and learning about the history of the invasions and all of that, and meeting the people up in the northern part of the island, which were just in huts with grass roofs and all that kind of stuff. It was an experience of a lifetime. Unbelievable.
Did Tina work after your son was born?
She worked until he was born, and then she stopped working. So then she was just a dependent then.
And then,
she stayed there until I left.
so she was able to stay. When you came home, you stayed with friends in California. And how long were you there before coming back to Minnesota?
Oh, I think it was only maybe a week or so. It wasn't very long before they discharged me. I had to go over to Travis Air Force Base to get that done.
Did the GI Bill support your education?
It finished out. I went back. I went back to Minnesota and got back into the apprenticeship program and enrolled in Dunwoody Institute of Technology, which did my plumbing training, and the GI Bill paid for all of my tuition for the rest of that.
Did you finish the plumbing training, or did you switch?
I became a master plumber in 1974. In 1975, the owner of the company I worked for passed away, and I took over running the company for his wife. And I worked in the plumbing industry there for that company for 10 years. And then I bought the company, changed the name, and owned the company all the way up until I sold the company and retired at 70 and a half.
Oh my.
And we did a lot of interesting things for the environment while we were in that business. We did environmental cleanup. We were one of the first companies to clean up the groundwater for the Superfund in Minnesota.
Oh my God.
And so up in New Brighton, there was a groundwater contamination from the Army Corps of Engineers um, ammunition plant, and we went down in the ground, pulled up the water, found out what was in there, isolated the area, drilled wells around the outside of the aquifer to see how far the contamination had gone, and then pulled it back into the center and pumped that bad water out. I worked with a group, teamed with a group of chemists and scientists, and we figured out a way to clean it and put it back into the city water system. In 1988, when we were in a huge drought like we are now, they were running out of water in New Brighton. So it was a pretty cool thing.
That's very cool.
We ended up doing that all over the country.
How do you feel your military service affected your career choices?
Oh, it was huge. For one thing, I became a plumber, and then I tagged in all my knowledge of the air conditioning and refrigeration business. Uh, really technical training that was done for me and taught to me for free in the military, and then I had a whole complete division of my company that was heating and air conditioning, and it was all. And the other thing, when I got out of the service, there was a recession, and I went out to I went to the union, and they says, "Well, we got a bunch of people unemployed, but go out to Shakopee, which is where I live now. This Ernie Stein, he wants to interview anybody before he hires them." So I went out, and he was a big promoter of veterans and all of that kind of stuff. So he wanted to see me, and he says, "Well, what can you do? You want to be you're going to go back in the apprenticeship and be a plumber." And he said, "What'd you do in the service?" And I told him. He says, "You can fix air conditioners?" And I says, "I sure can." He says, "You're hired. Come on tomorrow." So all of that about the service was super beneficial for me, and it worked well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, there.
Do you ever attend reunions?
No military reunions per se. I've gone down. I traveled down through the South particularly when we first got out of the service, and stopped and visited various people I'd been in the service with, and then visited my old sergeant in Biloxi and stayed with him for about I think almost a week, and stayed in contact with Dick, and he followed us on Facebook and all of that, and he'd comment. I went into a ship. He was in the Air Force, but he was in the Navy before that. He was a career man, and we took a Mississippi cruise and visited a ship that was made into a museum along towards New Orleans. And he said, "I was on that ship," and and of course he chimed in on Facebook. So that's a great thing for connecting with old friends. I have contacted and lost some of my best friends over time, but it's a pretty cool thing. We still will interact by way of Messenger and Facebook with some of my friends.
Other than the Honor Guard, are you connected with any other veterans organizations?
Well, the Honor Guard serves both the American Legion and the VFW, and so myself, I chose to serve in that way through the Honor Guard. I did not. I have not. I probably should join the American Legion before I die, but I have attended tons of things there, and every year we do. The Honor Guard goes up and puts on Veterans Day programs with alternating between the VFW and the American Legion, and so we do training. I don't want to call it training, but we show what the folding of the flag, what what the meaning is of it and all the different things, and just keep reminding people on Memorial Day and Veterans Day through our service in the Honor Guard that we can't forget our veterans. We have to keep acknowledging them and letting them know that we're proud of what they do for us.
That's so important. What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
Well, I wish more veterans knew about the services that the Veteran Services has available for them. So many veterans just assume that there's nothing that they can get, or that the nothing that the country will do for them. And there's tons of things. And that includes homelessness. There are services that are working towards ending that, and so on and so forth, health wise and everything else. And so I wish that people uh, would step back and realize that the veterans give up a lot. They don't make a lot of money. They're giving up time. Their families, particularly the wives and children, are sacrificing time with their, if it's the man or if it's the woman. I've got a nephew whose wife was a lifetime military officer and in the reserves, and a lot of people just don't realize what families have to rearrange and give up and change to allow that service for the country. And here in Minnesota, our reserve um, is one of the top reserve groups in the country, and they are called up and called upon because they're so prepared and so ready. Probably one of the most mobilized reserve units around.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't already covered? Any stories or memories that you wanted to share?
Let me.
I'll ask this about 5 different ways before we end.
Okay. I may have covered it all. I think it was interesting how when we were so young and we got sent off to these different schools and whatever, that the military really had it pretty figured out on how to engage us, how to weave us into the local townspeople and everything else, even though these training centers and schools were not always in huge metropolises and everything. They did a good job of doing that. I I thought it was really cool the way we got a chance during the early training, the basic training and whatever. They mixed up the National Guard, which were uh, at the time what we called 90-day wonders, um, and we learned to respect that they were doing their part just as much as we were. They did what they could, and they got the job done. And so it was really good that I appreciate being exposed to all the different people from the different services. Luckily, be assigned with the Marines, with the Seabees, and with the Air Force. And I would say one funny little story I could tell, when there was riots going on, they decided there was a potential for overrunning some of the guard areas. So they mobilized the prime beef and a whole bunch of other services and had us guard the ammunition storage areas and so on. Um, you know, and I worked with Marines a lot when I was mobilized on the prime beef stuff, but it was really something when you're out there on guard duty and you're in the dark and you can hear the sound of a foreign language, of people milling around and chanting and doing whatever the things they do for their riding on the other side of the fences, and then you have a line of Marines, then a line of Army, and then checkpoints where they put us Air Force people. You really appreciate your Marines and your Army guys who are, they're right there. They're going to take care of you, you know. And uh, the funny story that I always tell is, when I got to my checkpoint, um, I said, "Where's my rifle?" And the the sergeant said, "Here you go," and he gave me a big long flashlight. And I says, "What am I going to do with that?" And he says, "Hit him with the flashlight, because I'm not giving an Air Force guy a rifle with our men up in front of you." I didn't laugh at it then, but I do now. Because unfortunately, you know, us Air Force guys, we did jobs, and we did not spend a lot of time working with our rifles and so on. So there's that.
Was that given by an Army guy?
He was actually a Marine, and we had Korean special forces guys walking with dogs coming to us at the checkpoints, and they were amazing too. You you never heard them coming. You could be so alert, and all of a sudden they'd be standing behind you with the dog, and it's like, really, I feel so safe with you, bud. So
that is so cool. Is there anything that you've always wanted to share about your military experience but just haven't had the opportunity?
I think I've spilled my guts on just about just about
That's the goal.
all the interesting things. I had, you know, some of the best friends. The guy who was my best man in my wedding, he was used to pilot. Before Tina came there, he would get in small planes, and we'd go fly around, and he became besides being working in air conditioning and refrigeration, he was a corporate pilot that he would fly corporate people around. But he came up here one time and picked me up and flew me around over my house and everything, and to this day, you know, we still contact them at Christmas time, and he's retired on his old farmstead of his folks and everything, and so those lasting relationships are unbendable. I mean, they're just unbreakable. Maybe bendable, but not you can't be broken. So it's pretty cool.
Last question.
Okay.
How do you feel like your time in the military affected your thoughts on war and the military in general?
I wish there could never be another war again. But it's in this day and age with what's going on right now. Here we are in 2023, and we have terrorists, you know, attacking Israel. We have Russia trying to recapture land, reestablish their old selves, and I get so frustrated that some people are so short-sighted. They haven't looked back at history. They don't see that appeasement is not a way to stop war, because it just makes war bigger and worse. I wish there was never going to be a war again, but we have to stand up for freedom. We have to stand up for democracy, and we can't lose sight of the fact of what our soldiers do, and that they're always going to be there. The ones who are in there, we've got a total volunteer military service right now, and we should respect the fact that those people are there and maybe pay them a little bit more. So that's my soapbox, I guess.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you'd want to share?
I think I've done it all.
Oh, Paul, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for this opportunity to say hi to my future generations. Hello.
Actually, Before we stop, is there any message that you'd like to leave for your grandchildren and future generations who watch this video?
Well, don't discourage your kids from going in the military if they choose to do so. And it certainly should be a choice, hopefully. Don't stop getting together and having the family get togethers, and don't lose track of your friends. Keep connected, stay connected to family, and don't let it slip away. And don't remember your military. They're here for you and gave sometimes the ultimate price.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.